Do you love strong coffee, but it's always bitter? In this video, I'm going to talk you through all the different things that could make it bitter, how to control them, and make sure your coffee is smooth, rich, and strong without the bitterness. Firstly, the word strong drives me crazy. When you're talking about coffee, strength is a strange word to use. Strong really comes from a ratio. It comes from how much coffee you're using in the cup. If you went to a cafe and you ordered a weak coffee, they'll just put less coffee in your flat white. They're not going to suggest a different blend or a different coffee. They're just going to use less coffee, more milk. It's going to taste weaker. If you want a strong coffee, they'll probably put a double shot in there to give you more coffee to milk ratio. So firstly, we want to start using terminology like bold and robust. That's what's really going to give us a better idea of what you're chasing is that flavor profile that's not necessarily weak and soft, but it's bold and robust. So let's stop using the word strong when we're describing the taste of coffee. Now, if you're chasing caffeine, that's different. The caffeine can be affected by a bunch of different things. If you're buying cheap coffee and it's Robusta, it probably has more caffeine in it because it was grown at a lower altitude and therefore it needs more caffeine to fight off the bugs. Better quality coffee grown at a higher altitude will actually have less caffeine because it doesn't need to fight off the insects. We also will affect the caffeine during the roasting process. So while we're roasting coffee, the darker it gets, the more caffeine is excreted from the green bean. So be mindful that if you are chasing more caffeine, going for a darker roasted coffee isn't necessarily the best thing for you. And again, strength. It's how we perceive it. Coffee is it's so personal, it's really how we perceive the flavors. Now, you can choose a coffee that's maybe a lighter roast, it's higher in acidity, and it doesn't have those characteristics that you might attach to a strong coffee, like bitterness. Bitterness is traditionally something like a dark chocolate is a bitter flavor. It can be a positive flavor, but that's what we associate with. So if you like strong coffee, try to find yourself a good roasted coffee. Might have those dark chocolate notes, but they're not necessarily a bad bitterness. There are good characteristics of a strong profile coffee. So let's discuss how you can make a bold coffee without making it bitter. Now you've got to start with the beans. I just mentioned it. Look for something that is a medium to dark roast. The darker roasts actually could be a little bit burnt and they're going to give you those bitter flavors. You don't necessarily have to go dark to get strength. You're actually better off coming back to a medium to dark roast. A product like the Fix. This is a coffee that we roast medium dark. Now this coffee is designed to give you that full strength flavor, but without the dark roasted coffee bitterness that you might get. So this is Arabica beans. They're high quality beans. They're roasted well, and they will extract nicely to give you a full flavored coffee, but it's not designed as a dark roast that's going to give you a bitter extraction. And when you've got those beans, you need to look after them. Make sure you're storing them well. Old coffee just won't extract nicely and it will become bitter. So make sure you're buying coffee that has a roast date on it, and make sure we're using it anywhere from 7 to 28 days ideally from that roast date. If you're buying coffee and it's got an expiry date on it, chuck it out, go back to your local roaster and buy some coffee. Buy some coffee online, artisti.com.au. So you want to be buying coffee, storing it well, keep it in a dry, cool area. Don't put it in the fridge or freezer. We just want to look after that coffee and use it at its optimal time. The older it gets, the less it will extract nicely and it could give you those bitter flavors we're avoiding. And as always, we've got to talk recipes. We've got to talk dose, grind, and yield. So your grind setting is very important for your extraction. Now, if you're getting a really slow, syrupy extraction, you might be going too fine. There is a point there that it's too fine, it's going to over extract the coffee and that's going to give you those bitter flavors. On a standard machine, on espresso, we might be looking for anywhere between 25 to 35 second extraction. Anything longer than that, we're really going to be getting those bitter notes. So while you're looking at your grind setting, you do need to be thinking about your dose. Now, if you've got a low dose and a fine grind, again, you're just going to be trying to extract too much liquid out of that coffee. Now, that brings me to our ratio. Let's work with that 1 to 2 normal ratio, which means if you're using 20 grams of coffee, we want to be getting 40 grams of liquid yield. Now, yield is the key word for strength. This tells us that we have more or less coffee in the cup. Now, if you're using 20 grams, you're going to get 40 grams out, and you're making a milk coffee, just use less milk on that. But at least we know that the flavor of the coffee, based on the yield and based on that recipe, is going to be as best as it can. We'll maintain that dose, we'll maintain that yield, and then you're just adjusting your grind to get a longer extraction or a shorter extraction, and that will be the measuring point as to what's going to really impact the flavor of the coffee that you're making. Now, you can apply this to alternative brewing, French presses, anything. Think about the dose, apply obviously different recipes to different brewing devices, but think about the yield that you're getting out of the coffee, and that is really going to dictate the strength that you're drinking your coffee at. Remember that it's just a ratio of coffee to milk or coffee to water game. If you want a stronger flat white, just put less milk in your flat white. If you want a stronger long black, just put less water. This way, you can maintain the good flavor while getting the strength. Don't forget, the temperature of your water can have a real impact on the end result of your extraction. So if you can, try to reduce the temperature of your coffee machine, or if you're doing alternative brewing, we want to be aiming for no hotter than 94 degrees. If you can, get it back to the 90s, late 80s, and you might experience that you'll get that flavor out of the coffee, but we're not going to scorch it, and we're not going to get any of those extra burnt, bitter flavors purely from the heat of the water. And while we're talking about water, make sure it's filtered. The water is so much of the drink. You need to make sure that water is filtered and that you're not adding bitter flavors just from the taste of the water. Now, if you love cold brew, that's cool, but you might be looking for a strong cold brew, and it's quite hard to do some of these alternative brewing methods and getting a full strong coffee out of it. They're actually a different ratio. You can try to get more coffee, less water, but you might naturally add those bitter flavors. You can look to do a shorter steep time and change the recipe. But if you're looking for a strong coffee, there is some brewing devices like cold brew that might not necessarily get you the strength you're after. Always make sure your equipment is nice and clean before you start, because the oils or leftover grinds, they're gonna add bitter flavors to your coffee. So that's my tips on how to get a full flavored, bold coffee that will taste strong, but will still taste good and will get rid of all that bitterness that you've usually got when you're chasing that strong coffee flavor. Is there anything I've missed? Tell me in the comments below how you brew your coffee. If there's any particular coffees you chase, have you tried the fix? Did you get that bold, rich experience out of that as well? If you haven't, head to artisti.com.au, grab yourself a bag of the fix and experience that bold, rich coffee without the bitterness. So thank you for watching. Put any comments or questions in below, like the video, and subscribe for more coffee content. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.